So with the latest episode of Yellowjackets, we found out who Hillary Swank is playing, and if you've been watching for a while, you probably already know who that's going to be. And as that's the focus of the present day, in the past, we start to learn that some people may not be ready to go home despite everything they went through in the wilderness. So starting in the past, after Hannah is captured, there's the question of what's happening in the normal civilization. Is anyone looking for them? And Hannah, she's aware of the Yellowjackets and what they've been through, but she makes it clear pretty much that story has kind of exited the zeitgeist at this point. This, of course, is frustrating for many of them, but at the same time, it only fuels many of them looking at the potential of going home because clearly they have to be their own saviors at this point. However, while initially it seemed that Akilah and Travis were gonna go with Cody on their own and then hopefully bring somebody back, we find out that Akilah was actually leaving things so that they can be found, and Travis was very much about that whole leaving everybody behind, but he switches up when it becomes clear that him and Akilah aren't on the same side and he doesn't want to end up eaten or worse. So with that, the group finds Akilah through the tracks, brings Cody back to camp, and so begins the idea of it's time to pack, we're gonna go, and also we're gonna let Cody and Hannah bury Edwin, which I believe is his name. And with that, so come some people realizing that it might actually be time to go, they have moments that make them question this. Lottie, of course, is not really sure about going back because if she goes back, that means being medicated again. Also means whatever waning power that she has in the wilderness is going to be completely obliterated. When it comes to Shauna, because she is so well adapted to what's happening in the wilderness, she has hesitation with going back. Taissa has bad vibes. Akilah had a vision of animals dying. So one by one, people are starting to question whether or not they want to leave or not. By the time it's time to get going, for it's about almost a week's trip back to civilization, there's a good enough number of notable people who aren't going back that it complicates things. And that's where we're left off when it comes to the past. Heading to the present, Van is still very much in a coma. Thais is about to become Dog Thais to possibly save her, and Misty's calling Jeff because she's freaking out about what Shauna's doing. And as all that happens, Jeff is trying to convince the Joels about working with his business, not another business. And he owns up that, Shauna's crazy and ruined our meeting, but haven't you fell in love with a crazy woman? And with that, it seems he might have appealed to them in a way that he hasn't before. So maybe he'll get the contract, or at the very least, he may get some of his mojo back in terms of the next business deal he tries to do. Which leads to what Shauna's doing. Lo and behold, despite what was said in the last episode, Melissa's alive, and Melissa's played by Hillary Swank. She married Hannah's daughter, Alex, potentially out of guilt, or something else kind of twisted, but to make a long story short, we're told that Hannah gave Melissa that recording tape, and the idea was to give it to Alex. Melissa never did that. She held on to that tape, put it in a safe deposit box, and after some point speaking to a mentor who acted as a therapist, she decided to let go of that tape, give it to Shauna, with a note that Callie never passed on, so that maybe Shauna could become free of all this too. Now, without having that note, with Shauna being off her rocker thinking that Melissa cut her brake line, was stalking her and all that, she's ready for blood, she's ready for violence. And no matter how much Melissa, who now goes by Kelly, tries to push the idea, she has changed her life, she started over, she has a family now, Shauna calls BS. And unfortunately, even though Melissa knows Shauna, she decides to pick with her, antagonize her, and she tells her that back in the day when they were together, she didn't love her, she probably just feared her and was maybe attracted to the power that she had. In terms of modern time, she sure as hell doesn't love her. That everything that Shauna thinks she has in terms of Callie still loving her despite knowing the truth, or at least knowing part of it, that doesn't mean that Callie loves her. And it's just a lot of stuff where As much as you can see initially, Melissa was for a de-escalating situation. After some point, it seemed that plan went out the window, and she decided sooner or later Shauna's going to strike. So I might as well say what I've been wanting to say for a long time. Thing is, though, Melissa wasn't properly prepared. Shauna is still a beast, and Shawn is able to take her down, rip a piece of her flesh out of her shoulder, and the episode ends with her trying to force Melissa to eat part of her own flesh. So getting to the review section, I kind of appreciate the unreliable narrative that was presented with Shauna and the rest not knowing that Melissa faked her suicide. But at the same time, part of the reason why we appreciate that is just because the closer we get between the past and the present kind of linking up, the more that I enjoy the fact that they're starting to talk more about what happened after the Yellowjackets came back from the wilderness. So that's the main positive there. And to follow that up, I'm appreciating more and more how this show was starting to build up and starting to really push fans to think about what's going to happen when these girls leave the wilderness. For while it's not reminding us what happened to Travis, what happened to Natalie in terms of them becoming addicted to drugs or anything like that, at the same time, getting hints and clues of what happened and what people did kind of builds up the excitement to the point that hopefully we get that in maybe season 4 and don't have to wait up to season 5. The next highlight for us is definitely going to be Jeff's take on his wife, and that's because sometimes you can forget that Jeff and Shonda didn't get together just because of their religious beliefs and the fact that they got pregnant. And I think with this latest episode, it really pushed the idea that there is love there, at least from Jeff's side, and that he has not only become aware of how nuts his wife is, but he still loves her even though she is crazy to the point of killing people. And with that, I kind of have a new appreciation for Jeff, and I hope that it kind of continues because for a while Jeff just seemed like a character who was around but didn't really serve too much of a purpose besides being part of the facade that Shauna likes to put out there. That increasingly is being dismantled episode to episode, season by season. Which leads to the last highlight, and that's just Hillary Swank as Melissa, but I feel like there's a certain caveat that has to be brought into. What made Hillary Swank's introduction to the show perhaps better is because unlike when it came to Van, unlike when it came to Lottie, she got a proper introduction which included what happened before she was introduced in terms of revealing Melissa faked her suicide, got with Hannah's daughter and stuff like that. So it doesn't make it feel like there's this huge gap of a character. Instead, she got a proper build-up. She only had to interact with Shauna, who, with Shauna being one of the strongest characters on the show, it allowed her to have someone good to play off of. And even though it's not clear what's the plan for Hillary Swank as Melissa going forward, at the very least, it feels like she has a solid introduction, could have a decent middle, and if her end is from Shauna, not only would it make sense, but it at the same time would be a satisfying end for that character. Which leads to on the fence topics. First and foremost is Dog Taissa popping up both in the past and present, and that's just because Taissa is a consistent disappointment when it comes to the show. And even when it comes to the dog version of her, as interesting as she can be, at the same time, she hasn't really come up with anything that is worth noting. And considering more and more, the show has been kind of disproving theories and thoughts like the sound of the wilderness is just frogs being intimate. Who knows whether or not, like, Lottie has her special things. Maybe Taisha has the same, and it's not something that is grandiose as it has been appearing, but maybe it's just some issue that technically could be fixed with medication or suppressed, but I don't know. Honestly, it feels like despite us knowing that a lot of stuff was established before the plane crash, like Lottie having visions, Taissa having this dark presence in her family, they just haven't done anything with it enough to really make it an interesting part of the character going forward, and it kind of died off in a way that isn't like with Shauna losing the facade of her family being perfect, but just something that just had a major fall off the cliff moment to the point that it's kind of left the actress playing them without much to really bolster their character. Which leads to the last on the fence topic, and that's just As much as I understand for Lottie, Thaisa, and Shauna, them having some hesitation going back to civilization because of what they did in the wilderness and what they built up for themselves in the wilderness, I still don't want this show to take too long to get to the point of them leaving and come back to civilization, because that's the next major arc for them in the past. And I feel like we're kind of at this point where the wilderness has almost reached the peak of all it can be done out there, so we need to see them back in civilization, trying to get acclimated, trying to pretend that they're normal, never mind having this shared secret of all the things they did that makes them abnormal. So I can only hope if they continue to be in the wilderness, hopefully by midpoint of season 4, there's a time jump, they get rescued, and we can start watching them trying to acclimate back to normal life in New Jersey, rather than being stuck in the wilderness to season 5 and trying to end things with bridging the gap, or maybe trying to do some type of epilogue style where it bridges the gap to kind of wrap everything up.